From the burning mesas of the snowy desert to the slot machine-clad boardwalk of New Jersey, it's Imaginarium with Scott and Todd. I'm Scott Colbert.
And as always, with him is his sidekick, Garth.
And this week's guest on the Imaginarium is me.
There he sits with a pen and a yellow pad. What a handsome lad, that's my boy. B-R-L-F-Q spells mom and dad. Well, that ain't too bad, 'cause that's my boy. Well, you can have your TV and your nightclub, and you can have your drive-in picture show. I'll stay here with my little man near. We'll listen to the radio, biding my time, watching Scotty grow.
The one and only Scott Colbert.
The one and only. I have finally pulled the ultimate, what's the word I want to use? Ego card, I suppose. Having myself on my own show.
And why not?
And I had actually thought about doing this a few months ago. This was before you came on board. And I was going to have Wade or Joe come on and do the interview, but I never got around to it. But with the Imaginarium celebrating a year on the air this month, I thought this would be the perfect time to do that.
And why not? Take shameless self-promotion to yet another level.
Well, I'm all about the self-promotion, because if I don't do it, baby, nobody else is.
Boom. There you have it.
Exactly. You've been around enough indie filmmakers to know that if you want something done, you have to do it yourself.
As if I don't plaster my horror nerd logo all over everything.
Well, actually, you do. You're fairly conservative with that. I don't see you pushing that a whole lot.
Oh, well, be careful what you wish for.
Oh, I'm not wishing for it. I'm just... Well, but that's the whole Facebook thing. Sometimes I don't see posts from people, and I know that they post on a regular basis, but the algorithms that Facebook uses as to what you actually see on your news page, it boggles my mind. I don't understand how they do it, because there's some people I just never see posts from, and I know they do post a lot.
Well, that's probably a topic for another show. I kind of, I guess, take a little bit different view of Facebook. I don't levy a lot of the criticisms that some people do, I have a couple of friends that have worked for Facebook in their engineering department, and there's actually a rationale behind why they do what they do. So it's not just, I'm not the biggest Mark Zuckerberg fan in the world, but there is an actual rationale behind why they run the site the way they do. So, but we can geek out about that at another time. Today, it's all about you, my friend.
Yes, all about me. So, sack it to me, baby.
Well, I know you have some topics that you particularly wanted to talk about, and that's cool. Along the way, I'll have a couple of questions that I thought of, and my first one is, Scott, how the hell did you get so damn sexy?
You know what? That's genetics. I come from some very sexy stock.
Fantastic.
Actually, I can't say that's a lie, but my mother, in her younger days, looked just like Natalie Wood.
Really?
Yeah, my mom was pretty much a knockout when she was younger. And and for 74, she still looks fantastic today. And my dad was a very handsome man too when they both got married, because they got married young at 18, so they were young and beautiful. Then they had my sister, then they had me, and then they grew old at a rapid clip.
Yeah, that tends to happen. So I know that maybe we'll just talk about this to start. A friend of yours, an author friend of yours, T.M. Wright, sadly passed away recently.
Right.
First of all, I'm sorry for your loss. I personally didn't know TM, but I know you did. So perhaps you want to just talk about that a little bit?
T.M. Wright wrote a book called A Manhattan Ghost Story, and that came out the very early 80s. And I had heard about it through Fangoria magazine. I reviewed it, gave it a good review, and so I picked it up and fell in love with it. And at the time, I was actually writing plays. I was doing some like short stories, but nothing really major. And after reading reading his book, he just made writing horror look so fucking easy. So, of course, I tried my hand at it, and I realized that he made it so easy because he's just a master at it. And it was an interesting learning experience. But he was really, people would think, Stephen King would be kind of somebody who I modeled myself after. And that's true to an extent, but it was actually Terry, really, that got me back into writing horror. And so after I stopped writing plays and started writing horror again, I read his back catalog, and every time he had something come out, I would keep up with it. And then I met him on forum, I suppose. It was called Shocklines, and at the time there were a lot of well-known writers that were on there. John Skipp, Terry, of course, Tom Piccirilli, Craig Spector, Ramsey Campbell's on there. I mean, so, there's some heavy hitters that were on that board. And when I saw Terry was on there, I sent him a message, kind of like a fan message. We just picked up a friendship pretty quickly. We have a lot in common. He was very interested in my writing. Sometimes when you have a well-established writer, they always get, well, can you read my manuscript? Can you read this? And the last thing that you really want to do is actually read it, because if it sucks, you don't want to have to tell them that it sucks.
Right.
But he asked to read some of my stuff, and he really, really liked it. He said some very, very complimentary things about it. And we just struck up a friendship. We corresponded regularly for a year or two. And then he started losing his vision to the point that he couldn't read or even write anymore. And then he was diagnosed with Parkinson's and then Alzheimer's. So he spent the last, I would say, 2 years, or the last year in a nursing home. The last 2 weeks or so, he was on a feeding tube because he couldn't even feed himself. So it was, very sad, because he really meant a lot to me. And he really gave me the confidence in my writing that I didn't have at the time. And he was very well liked in the horror community. He really changed the way people look at ghost stories. In the foreword to his book, The Manhattan Ghost Story, he talks about the development hell that it went through, because it was optioned by Carolco. And then Carolco had just released Cutthroat Island, which, as we all know, was a big bomb.
Yes, it was. Rightfully so.
Yeah, put him out of business, and that ended his deal with Carolco. Now, Richard Gere was attached to it at one point, and then Ron Bass was attached to it to direct and write the screenplay. And everybody was making millions of dollars off of this book, except Terry. He wasn't getting shit for it. But everybody else was making money off of him on it, and quite a bit of money. And for 10 or 15 years, this went through development hell, and nothing ever came of it. It's a shame, because it would really be a kick-ass movie. I hope sometime in the future that it does get made.
I didn't know the entire story about what happened to Terry at the end, and Alzheimer's is a tragedy for anyone, but for a writer and a creative person, I almost can't think of anything worse, No,
it's bad enough to not be able to read or write when you're a writer, but then to, it's like kicking you when you're down. Then to get Alzheimer's on top of that, it's a tough way to go.
For listeners who might not be as familiar with T.M. Wright, what would you recommend? Like, what would you recommend that they, as sort of a primer? One of my personal favorites is Strange Seed.
Yep.
And of course, Manhattan Ghost Story. Or what would you consider primers? For people who might be interested and want to start reading some of Terry's work.
I would definitely start with the Manhattan Ghost story. There's actually, I think there's 3 or 4 books in the series, and they've got them in an omnibus edition on Amazon. And I would start with that, then go back to his first book, Strange Seed. And that's the book, I believe, that Stephen King blurbed and said he was a rare and blazing talent. And I interviewed Terry once, and I asked him what he thought that meant, and he's, I have no idea what the hell that means. but it shot my book sales up the charts like you wouldn't believe. So
there you go. If I'm not mistaken, what Stephen King had said about it, he compared it. He said it was one of the best supernatural novels since Interview with the Vampire. So, you know, high praise from Stephen King.
Oh, definite high praise from him. And, you know, well worth it. Because he, you know, nobody does supernatural horror like he does. And towards the, you know, his later stuff went into some surreal territory, which I found very interesting and different from anything else that I'd been reading. And I'm not sure I would recommend anybody to start with that. But if you pick up Manhattan Ghost Story, like his style, like his stories, then you'll pretty much like anything else, I think.
So, Scott, obviously, you know, I think everyone, we've certainly established, and anyone who knows you knows that you yourself are a writer, a long-time successful writer. Did you know early on when you were young that that's what you wanted to do, or how did you decide to get into writing?
I knew from an early age I wanted to be creative. I knew that. I started off wanting to be a comedian.
Really?
I did impressions as a kid. I did Richard Nixon. Now, let me make this perfectly clear. And I did Freddie Prinze, and I did a lot of stuff. And that was actually kind of pretty good. I mean, for a 10, 11-year-old doing impressions, it was pretty good. I wrote a story. The very first story I ever wrote was like it was a ripoff of Rocky, is exactly what it was. And because I had seen Rocky, and I loved the movie, and it just kind of got me excited. And so I wrote this story and sent it off to a publisher, but never heard back from them. And I couldn't imagine why, because I was 11 at the time. Then I decided I wanted to be an actor. Did some acting in high school. Then I thought, well, maybe I want to be a director. And then I thought, no, I think I want to be a writer, because I would much rather have people say my words than me saying somebody else's words.
Gotcha.
That's when I decided that I wanted to be a writer, and I started writing plays. And my friend Joe and I had a little theater troupe with a mutual friend in San Francisco, in the East Bay. And so that was a huge learning experience for me as far as plays go and theater. Then I stopped. I stopped writing, and to this day I'm not sure why I quit. But I didn't start writing again until about 8 years ago. And then when I picked up the pen again, it was like I'd never stopped. And I kind of, regret not having written for all those years. But I guess it's something that I needed to do. I had other things going on in my life. I had some other issues, so writing wasn't necessarily a priority for me.
Life does have a way of getting in the way.
It does. And I had a drug issue and an alcohol issue, which certainly didn't help the situation either. So after I got clean and sober, that's when I started writing again.
Fantastic. So do you have a favorite format? I mean, you mentioned you'd written some plays. I know you've written both fiction and nonfiction, and we'll talk a little bit about your books, your nonfiction. But do you have a favorite format?
I don't really. Well, that's not true. I like the novella. I like the length of a novella, kind of between a short story and a novel. That length seems to suit me quite well. I have a hard time staying under like 5,000 words in a story to keep it a short story. But I also don't always have the steam to make, a 300, 400, 500-page book. So the novella is like the perfect thing for me. And in today's day and age, when everything is really all digital, and people don't have the type of attention span that they used to, novellas sell very well.
That's interesting. I personally, I do not own a Kindle or a Nook or anything. I have resisted it for a long time. I don't know how much longer I will. I guess maybe when I finally get through the pile of unread books that I have. There's something about holding an actual book in my hands and turning the pages that still just appeals to me. I'm not feeling the whole e-reader thing. What are your thoughts on the direction that has taken?
When the Kindle first came out, people were talking about, oh, this is the future, and this is where publishing is going to go, and everybody needs to jump on this bandwagon. And I thought, it's just a fad. Nobody is going to want to read on a piece of glass and plastic. I couldn't see it. And of course, I was very wrong about that. So don't ask me for stock information either, because. And I still prefer books, physical books. The only reason that I go mainly to electronic books now, or ebooks, is I can just adjust the font. I can make it bigger. And my eyesight isn't quite what it used to be. And even with the bifocals that I have, sometimes it's still very difficult to read the print in paperbacks because they're making them so goddamn small now.
Yes, they are. They are.
And I just can't be bothered, squinting and trying to read it. So, the e-readers, and I don't have a Kindle. I use the Kindle app on my phone, on my tablet, or on my laptop occasionally. So, and that works out well. I would rather have, a physical book, but unfortunately, the eyesight dictates otherwise.
Yep.
Now, the interesting thing, not to interrupt, is the sales of physical books are going up again, and the sale of ebooks are going down. So there may even be another change in the way publishing is going in another few years, depending on if that trend continues.
Thank you for sharing that. I did not know that statistic. I do understand the appeal of the electronic format. I do have other friends who are writers who like it because and I don't want to ever say publishing is easy, but it's a little bit easier for them to publish, to Amazon, say, in an electronic format than to try to get a physical book published. So if it allows people to get their work out there and to be seen by people, then I'm all for that.
Oh, absolutely. And the thing is, if you go to a small publisher, small press publisher, or some of the mid-press publishers, all you're going to get now is really an ebook version. You're not going to get a paperback version, and you're certainly not going to get a hardcover version unless you're somebody like Keelan Patrick Burke, or Brian Keene, or some of the other well-known names, where they'll do special editions, which are very expensive and very collectible. Otherwise, everything is just, ebooks, because it's a lot easier and it's a lot cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I guess we just live in a digital world, Scott.
We do. And it's funny. It's the kind of stuff that I always kind of dreamed of when I was a kid. But now that I'm actually living in that kind of technology, I'm not sure I'm all that happy with it. I think the technology has outpaced our ability to use it in a useful fashion.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, as you know, I work in the IT field, So, and yet at the same time, I'm not a big gadget guy. I'm not fascinated with my cell phone. To me, it's just a tool, serves a purpose, and that's it. I don't care about having the latest and greatest cell phone. I couldn't even tell you what the big, like the killer apps are today. I personally, and maybe it's because I deal with it all day, every day as my career, that in my personal life, I don't want to be bothered,
Yeah. And unfortunately, it's kind of a necessary evil for me, because I do, most everything that I do is self-published. Not all, but most. And so, when you self-publish, of course, you have to self-promote, and you really have to learn how to live on either your laptop or your phone. I live on my phone. I would be lost, absolutely lost without my phone. And I hate to say that, because I hate being so dependent on technology, but it's absolutely true for me. It allows me to interact with people on a much quicker basis than if I just, went on the laptop every time I needed to do something. The phone has proved to be a very important tool for me.
Yeah, I certainly can understand it.
That's one of the reasons I ended up getting a new phone and getting a phablet, as they would call it. It has a 5.7-inch screen. Mostly because I use it so much, I need the bigger, I need the bigger screen to see the goddamn thing.
So, I know. So I kind of want to make it. I want to just go ahead and let you sort of say whatever you want to say, Scott. The last question I have about your writing is, just because I'm curious, you've written several books that of essays and about various filmmakers: David Cronenberg, John Waters, David Lynch. What is it that? Why did you do that? In other words, were they just favorite filmmakers of yours, and you said, "Let me write about it"? I find it interesting that you went in that direction fairly frequently.
The first one that I started off with was John Waters, and originally I didn't have any intention of doing anything other than doing the John Waters stuff. I was writing for Talkbacker at the time, and I was doing, a lot of movie reviews and news stories and whatnot. And I really wanted to just do something a little bit different. And so I thought, well, what if I just talked about, the films of one specific director? And for me, it was easy. It was John Waters, because I love his work. And I think he's probably one of the most underrated but most important directors of the last 40 years. When I started writing about his stuff, that was the intent, was to kind of make a case of why he is so important in the movie industry. And people really responded to it. They really, really liked that. And so I thought, well, maybe I can do somebody else after that. It became easier to do that than actually go back to my fiction. I'm a very slow writer, fiction-wise, really, really slow. Like Thomas Harris kind of slow, 5 and 10 years between books. This gave me the opportunity to write on a regular basis, get my name out there, while I slowly trudged through my fiction. So the next one was David Cronenberg. And these are all directors that I respected and I admire and that I think are very important and that kind of shape the type of fiction that I write. So went through David Cronenberg. Then next was Terry Gilliam and then David Lynch. And I'm working through Brian De Palma now, slowly but surely.
Nice. Yeah. That's a good one.
Oh, yeah, I like Brian De Palma. And I've forgotten just how good he really is. People are so quick to label him a Hitchcock wannabe, but he still has his own style in spite of his influence by Hitchcock.
That's for sure. I had always heard, the Hitchcock thing, comparison to him. And you know what? I think to a degree, whether it's conscious or subconscious, everyone in a creative field has their influences, whether it's musical or literature or art, painting, whatever. I personally don't have a problem with it, unless you're directly plagiarizing someone, of course.
Well, exactly, and I don't have a problem with it either. And I just watched Dress to Kill, and I hadn't seen that in years, probably 15, 20 years at least. And I'd forgotten a few things about it. One, just how goddamn good that movie is. And two, there's an entire space of maybe 20 to 25 minutes where nobody says anything. It's just the camera following Angie Dickinson and her sexual escapade. That was the other thing that always surprised me about Dress to Kill is Angie Dickinson getting naked. Because I remembered her as a policewoman.
Right.
And to see her in that type of role was very, it just kind of takes you back a little bit. But that whole, 20 or 25 minute bit where nobody says anything, it was just absolutely riveting. I don't know that you could get away with that today.
Probably not. I mean, then again, there's a lot of things in movies that you probably couldn't get away with today. Can you imagine them trying to make Blazing Saddles today?
Yeah, that's one of my favorites to talk about when I talk about movies, old school and new school is Blazing Saddles. That never could have been made today. Never.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, both on the show and on various Facebook threads, how nobody understands satire or parody anymore. If you make a satirical reference to race or homosexuality or whatever, pick anything, no one will ever see it for satire or parody. It's let's be offended immediately,
Well, exactly. And I think a large part of that, and we actually, I think, touched on this a little bit last week, is most of our communication is digital anymore. It's either through messaging or through texting or, posts on Facebook. You don't have that person in front of you. It's very difficult to understand, what their intent is behind something they say. And I get this a lot because I'll post something that I think is funny, and I'll get a comment, mostly from my mother. How could you say that? They just don't, because they can't see me. They can't see that I'm being sarcastic or whatever the case may be. And it makes it very difficult. People have forgotten how to communicate with each other.
Yeah, I agree. Social media and the internet has opened up like a whole world of communication. Me, I'm a self-proclaimed Facebook junkie. But as a result of it, though, I'm in contact with people all over the world who share my interests, But as you said, by the same token, when you don't have visual cues or body language, it is hard to figure out where someone's coming from sometimes.
It is. And you and me, we talk verbally basically just when we do our podcasts. Everything else is through Facebook Messenger. And that's the way it is with most of my friends. Hell, even my mother texts me more than she calls me. She's gotten to the point, like, oh, you mean I don't have to talk to somebody? I can just send them a message? Oh, yeah, let's do that.
The times they are a-changing.
Yeah, I never thought my 74-year-old mother would ever be texting, but now you can't get her to stop it.
That's one thing my mom never embraced. The fact that she could actually answer a phone call on her cell phone was an achievement for her. Texting, messaging, forget it. Not going to happen.
Well, it was kind of my fault because I kind of dragged her into technology, kicking and screaming. Because I had my first computer was an Amiga 500. It was either a 250 or a 500. So, and that was back in the mid 80s, mid to late 80s. So I've been using computers for a long time now, and I was on the bulletin boards, the BBSs. I'm sure you remember those.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
You know, the precursor to the online services like AOL and Prodigy and then the internet. And so I'd been online for a very long time, and I tried to keep getting her into it, to keep her up with the technology, because she was working at the Superior Court and they were just getting everything computerized. And I thought it was important for her to know some of this stuff. But she's impatient, and if she can't figure it out within about 10 seconds, she just wants nothing to do with it. So the fact that I called her the other day. Now, this was amazing. I called her the other day, and I said, "Where are you?" "I'm in the car." I said, Are you on your phone?" She said, "No, I hooked it up to the Bluetooth." And
What?
I thought, how that? She hooked up her phone to the Bluetooth that's in the stereo system in the car. So she just presses a button on her steering wheel, and the call comes in through the speaker. I don't even know how to do that.
All right, Scott, what's on your mind?
Well, let's see. What is on my mind? Certainly the 1-year anniversary of the Imaginarium was on my mind. You know, with the changes and everything that have been going on with the Supernauts, I'm really happy that we've been able to make everything go as smoothly as possible with that. I'm not sure that I knew a year ago that I was actually going to be doing this a year from now. I thought, it's a nice little side project, and it gives me something a little bit else to do. Then it really kind of took off, and I started really getting excited about doing it every week, because I was talking to so many different people, in the filmmaking and writers and whatnot, that I just really, I couldn't imagine not doing it now. And cool. So it's always, that's exciting. And we've got it paid up for another couple of years, so we're not going anywhere. Having you come on the show, well, the first time you came on the show and did the interview, I absolutely loved that interview. Thought, how the hell does he not have his own podcast? You're smart. You know a lot about movies. You've probably forgotten more about movies than I know at this point in my life.
Thank you.
And your
laziness, my friend. It was laziness.
That's true enough.
Let's just call it like it is.
Well, yeah, got to be honest about that. And I thought I was looking to do something to not really shake up the show, but do something a little bit different. And so I thought, bring you on. That's been great. It's changed the dynamic of the show a little bit. But I absolutely love it, and I look forward to it every week. It's really kind of the highlight of my week, which should tell you just how sad my life is at this point.
Well, thank you. Hey, listen, you have your cat.
I do. I have my cat. Yes.
So I'll try not to rank on you too hard about that.
And she is sleeping next to me on the couch. And I've got a couple of books coming out. There's the David Lynch book. We're recording this on a Thursday night, so it should actually be out tonight, and it'll definitely be out by the time people listen to this on Monday. And it's the collection of the essays that I had written for Talkbacker and then for the Supernauts. And I just collected them and put them into an ebook version, took them offline, put them in an ebook version. And because they did pretty well that way, the ones with John Waters and David Cronenberg. And so I thought I kind of wanted to do that with David Lynch and the Terry Gilliam stuff too. And then what I'm going to do is collect all 4 of them and put them in an omnibus edition, a print edition, and that's just going to be print only. And then hopefully that should be out by Christmas time, because I actually really want to have a physical copy of them as well as a digital.
I myself would like to have that.
I'm working on it, and of course my good friend Joe is doing all my covers again. And I just saw a preview for the Terry Gilliam cover, and boy, it's really fantastic. I think it may be the best cover that he's done yet. I'm really excited about that one. I think the cover may be better than my writing in it.
Oh, okay then.
Yeah. And Terry Gilliam should be out in a couple of weeks, probably maybe a week and a half, I would think.
Cool.
I'm slowly but surely finishing my horror fantasy, and I'm hoping that I can get that done early next year so I can have that out by spring. Because it's been a long time since it'll be 3 years in January since Barbed Wire Kisses came out. So that's a long time between fiction. And I've had a couple of short stories printed here and there between then. And that's one of the other reasons, actually, that I put out the ebooks of the essays is to keep my name out there.
Sure.
You know, and keep something getting out on Amazon that people can pick up.
Sure. Scott, do you find that you're very hard on yourself as a writer? You mentioned earlier in our chat that you're very slow. But is that because you are hard on yourself and you go back and rethink things over and over again? Or is it just because of attention to detail?
You know, like any writer, I am my own worst critic. It's difficult for me sometimes to think that I have any kind of a talent. So it makes it a little bit harder to want to get back to the grindstone of writing fiction. And the funny thing is, I went back and I started reading Errors of the Flesh, which is the horror fantasy novel. As I'm reading through it, and I'm getting engrossed in it. And I wrote the fucking thing, so I know what happens next. But I'm thinking, what's going to happen next? So I take that as a cue that this is actually something that might be pretty good. And that got me excited to start writing it again. But yeah, the self-doubt just really kicks me in the ass all the time.
I guess, it's certainly not the first creative person I know that has said that.
You know, and I say that, and I don't really want to sound like I'm blowing my own horn, but you know, I'm going to. I mean, I've got a 4.5 star average rating on Amazon, and that's, you know, and I've got 10 reviews, and there's only a couple of those that are from people that I know. You know, all the others were from people who just happened to pick up the book. And the last time I checked, I've got like a 4-star average rating on Goodreads. So people like it. People like my work. You know, they rate it highly. But it's still very difficult for me to accept that. I mean, anytime anybody says, oh, I read this, I'm surprised. I'm like, really? You read my work? Like, you know, you actually took the time to read something that I wrote? It still kind of blows me away. I don't think I'll ever get over that feeling of people willing to spend time reading my work.
Now, listen, on a much, much smaller scale, obviously, I'm not a published writer. I do not claim to be. But I'm always surprised when I go to horror conventions or I'm in some social area and people actually walk up to me. And this just happened to me recently at the Chiller Theater Convention. Hey, Todd, I read all your social commentary and your posts on Facebook. And, you know, even though I don't reply, I wanted to let you know that I do follow you on Facebook. I read all your social commentary and your political posts. And I'm like, what really? You know, I write that stuff really for myself, you know, more than anything. So like I said, on a much smaller scale, I understand where you're coming from when someone comes up and appreciates something that you've put out into the world. You know, it's pretty cool.
It is. And, you know, that's the kind of ego stroking that really keeps you going. Because, I mean, artists, it's not that we want to be loved. We just don't want to be hated. And I get it. That's what it is for me. Because, yeah, I know you hate this word bullying, but I was bullied as a kid. I'm not going to lie about that. But I will say, nobody deserves bullying, but I had a big mouth. So maybe some of the ass kickings may have been justified, but you know, it was still not necessarily an easy childhood. I think, you know, kind of wanting to be a comedian or being a writer or an actor was a form of, acceptance that I didn't have growing up. I mean, if you want to get into the psychology of it.
I think deep down, all of us want to be liked and accepted by our peers and fellow humans. I always laugh at the people who loudly and constantly proclaim that they don't care what anybody thinks about them. I always call bullshit on that.
Well, exactly.
Deep down, like if you really didn't care, you wouldn't say a word about it. You would just go about your life, and you wouldn't feel the need to say it all the time,
Well, yeah, exactly. And I see that a lot, and it just makes me smile. Because somebody will post something on Facebook, and then somebody will comment, well, who cares about that? Well, you made a comment about it, so, obviously you, so don't try to deny it, smartass.
So many things on social media make me giggle. Like when the final Star Wars trailer hit the internet, and within like 0.4 seconds, it had 50 million views or something like that. It was ridiculous. And you have all the cool kids who have to go online and post, am I the only one who doesn't care about Star Wars? Yes, you are. Now shut the fuck up.
Exactly. In fact, I've got a meme somewhere, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's like, there's 7 billion people in the world. No, you're not the only fucking one. Now shut up.
Right. Exactly. And again, we all have different tastes. I have friends that legitimately don't care about Star Wars. It's just they're not sci-fi fans. They don't feel the need to run around saying it all the time. They're just not. They like other things, but they don't bash it.
I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan, and I've talked about that on other shows, but I don't bash it, and I don't begrudge people, liking it and getting into it. Look, I love Star Trek. That's my show. That's one that really captured my imagination. And I love the original series, and I love Next Generation. There are Star Wars fans that look at Star Trek and just kind of look down at it. But, hey, that's what I love. You can love Star Wars, I can love Star Trek, and we can all get along.
Oh, no, Scott. This is the nerdiverse we're talking about. They cannot get along.
Yeah, sad but true.
Well, I, for one, I always was a much more a Star Trek fan myself, but I am very much looking forward to the premiere of the new movie, and I'm looking forward. Even if I don't go opening night, I want to go to a theater just to see everyone in their costumes, and everyone having a good time and getting into it. Life sucks a lot of the time, So if something that comes along that can manage to bring so many people together, how cool is that? Maybe I'm getting a little idealistic or corny, but I think that's cool.
No, that is cool. And I'm just wondering, if they're actually going to allow people to get in costume, because I read that, and I forget which theater chain it was, they weren't going to let people bring in the lightsabers or wear helmets or hoods or masks because of, safety reasons, quote unquote.
Well, you know what, Scott? I think that, and I know that I forget the theater chain myself, but there's a couple of them, and they're taking a lot of heat for it. But it's just a sad commentary on the society we live in today, because all it would take is one deranged lunatic, wearing a mask to start shooting in a theater, and for us not to be able to identify them, and everybody will lose their minds.
Yeah.
I do not envy the theater owners of being put in that position. It's like going through metal detectors to get into a baseball game. It's sad, but then the one time something happens, the criticism will be, why didn't you do anything to stop it?
Well, exactly. And it's I wouldn't want to be a theater owner and have to make that decision. I really wouldn't.
Sadly, my daughter is growing up in a very different world than I did. I remember in 1980, Empire Strikes Back came out. I had never seen a movie before where the line wrapped around the outside of the theater.
Yeah.
Back then, nobody really dressed up. Like the fan experience wasn't what it is today, but it was still a huge crowd. It never occurred to anybody on that line that anyone would shoot up that theater. It just was not even remotely a possibility or thought in anyone's head.
Oh, no. And it wasn't when I went to see Return of the Jedi. I saw that that was the first one I actually went to by myself. And there was a huge line for that. And there were some people dressed up. It was never even a thought that something could happen. And it is a sad commentary on society now that we actually have to have silly discussions like this. Well, I know you wanted to talk about Melissa Matheson for a minute.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for reminding me. And I'm very curious to see what you have to say about it. E.T. remains one of my all-time favorite movies. Today, when I look back on it, I see some of the flaws that maybe I've ignored all these years. But and we've talked about movie scores, and this is one of them.
Yep.
When that flourish in the score hits, when E.T. and Elliot fly across the moon, I still get chills to this day.
Oh.
And I'm 7 years old, and there's nothing like it,
Absolutely. And I loved E.T. I loved it when I saw it the first time. I loved it when I saw it the next 3,000 times. And I love it the next 3,000 times that I see it. It's probably my favorite Spielberg movie. And what I find interesting about E.T. is when it came out, it was everywhere. It was probably the hugest movie that I remembered up to that point. And it just was... It was ridiculous. I mean, it played all summer. I mean, what movie plays all summer now?
Oh, God.
You're lucky if it lasts a month in a theater. E.T. went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then somewhere along the line, people started giving E.T. shit and talking about, it actually really wasn't good, and, Spielberg was a hack, and the writing was bad, and yada, yada, yada. And those same people who were, bad-mouthing E.T. after loving it when it came out, then bad-mouthing it, and now, loving it again since Melissa passed away. And it's the hot hypocrisy that just annoys the piss out of me.
Okay, when we talked earlier, before we started taping, and you said, "Oh, I have a comment about, Melissa Matheson and E.T." I'm like, "Uh-oh, what is this going to be?" But it's like that. It's like that everywhere, even on the local level. Mentioning, people passing away. There was a sudden, as we talked about last week, there was a sudden passing in the local horror community here in New Jersey with author Nick Casella. And, he was well known in the New Jersey horror community. I'm not going to lie and say that Nick and I were the best of friends. We were casual convention friends. But there are people I remember who did nothing but badmouth Nick Casella and shit all over his writing. And criticize them to no end, were falling all over themselves on social media when he passed away.
Yep.
And I'm not saying you should blatantly disrespect the dead, but maybe you're better off just not saying anything or just offering polite condolences to his wife, rather than fawning, and so I get exactly what you're saying. Yeah. I guess that's the point.
Yeah, that's a good point that you bring up, because I've seen that they'll badmouth somebody and then once they die, they put them up for sainthood. they end up making it about themselves and their opinions. And, I think that's, a huge slap in the face to the deceased's family. And I hate that. I absolutely hate that. Especially if they were actually a really decent person. What I would like to see is, a true asshole dies. Then I would really like to see people be honest. Well, I'm glad that fucker is dead. He was really such a prick. That I would love to see one day.
It's funny you should say that, because I say that all the time. I always, I don't even want to say mixed feelings, but to me, if someone's a douchebag in life, then they're a douchebag in death. Like, should we start singing Hitler's praises because he's now no longer living? People are just amazing to me. When someone is alive, they're, God, the guy's such an ass. And then when he dies, I feel so bad. Shut up.
Yeah, when Mickey Rooney died, there were a couple of people on some of the film forums that I go to had made comments about what a prick he was in real life. And from everything that I've heard, he really was an asshole. Yeah. And then people are like, oh, how could you say that about him? He's you have no right to talk about him like that now that he's dead. Well, yes, you do. He was a dick then. That hasn't changed. He's just a dead dick.
Right. No. I always used to say that when I used to tease my mom sometimes unmercifully. And when we were watching, she was a big Bing Crosby fan. And we'd watch the holiday movies, with Bing Crosby, Bells of St. Mary's. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, now imagine him beating the shit out of his wife and kids when he got home that day. And let me know how much you love Bing Crosby.
Art Linkletter, another one.
Yes.
Yeah, we could actually probably go on and on about who really were assholes, and it's actually far more than we actually think, probably.
Oh, I'm sure, especially in the entertainment industry, I'm sure a lot of people put up a good public persona.
Well, yeah, look at Bill Cosby.
Right?
Yeah, now there is a perfect example.
Absolutely. So, all right. The last thing I want to say about Melissa Matheson is I always found it interesting that she never really went on to do any other thing that was huge. E.T. was, her big claim to fame. She wrote one of the segments for Twilight Zone, the movie.
Right.
And she, I'm pretty sure she did the screenplay for The Indian in the Cupboard. And then I guess Kundun was the other big one, but even that was not, remotely the popularity of E.T. So I guess I'm a little surprised by that.
I am too, but and I wonder if it's kind of like Harper Lee with To Kill a Mockingbird. She had one great story in her, and that was it. That was all she really needed to tell. And,
maybe.
And I think, that's a possibility, or no, I don't know what kind of a deal she had when she wrote E.T. and if she got any money on the back end, but I'm sure she got royalties, and maybe she just thought, fuck it, I don't really have to work anymore. I'm living off of royalties.
Yeah, that could very well be.
And you never really know, but I think it's sad when somebody has that kind of talent, you really do want to see what they do next because you get excited by it. Because, there's an honest-to-God storyteller who can tell a really, really good tale. And there's just not enough of those today.
Well, and then again, that's the topic for another show, Scott, I guess, about the dearth of good writing anymore in Hollywood. It's all about bang 'em up blockbusters.
It always comes back to that, doesn't it?
You know what? I don't want to, God, I could talk with you all night about movies and, literature and everything. That's what audiences want, Avengers 2 makes a $1.5 billion. And I liked it when I saw it in the theater. It was a good popcorn movie. When I watched it again on demand, I was like, wow, that story is really weak. I mean, really weak.
It's because when you see a movie like The Avengers on the big screen, you're so overwhelmed by the screen and the sound and the action and the audience excitement that it's very easy to overlook stuff like that. And then when you're sitting at home in your living room watching the movie, it's a very different experience. And you tend to concentrate more on the little things. And you're like, wow, really? Holy shit, that's bad.
Yeah, and it's sad because there's so many comic books sometimes don't get the credit that they deserve. There are some really great stories that have been told in comic books.
Oh, definitely. All right, well, I'm going to wrap myself up here. And I'm going to have links. Thank you for having me on the show, Todd, first of all.
Hey, it was a pleasure, Scott. Thanks for joining me.
I'm glad I could be here.
Yes. I'm glad your cat could make it as well.
Yeah, she's still snoozing away, actually. She has a bit of a cold, so she's got a snore to her, which is kind of odd. I will put up links on the show page for those who are interested in any of the books that I've got out there, if you don't already have them. As always, if you like the Supernauts, please go ahead and give us a review and rate us on iTunes. And take a listen to all the other podcasts we have with the Supernauts Network at thesupernauts.com. And until next time, may all your journeys be filled with pure imagination.
There he sits with a pen and a yellow pad. What a handsome lad, that's my boy. BRLFQ spells mom and dad. Well, that ain't too bad, 'cause that's my boy. Well, you can have your TV and your nightclub, and you can have your drive-in picture show. I'll stay here with my little man near. We'll listen to the radio, biding my time, watching Scotty grow.